How did you first come to discover context?
I was looking for papers that were for an academic audience and also a non-academic audience or a mainstream audience. So that way, my first year students would be able to understand scholarly content. And I found context to be a great segue between the world outside of universities and those, entering academic spaces.
Can you walk us through your main argument? What's the key takeaway you want the readers to get?
So I want readers to learn about how curriculum anxieties or anxieties over curriculum content occurs in two settler colonial societies that are separated on the other sides of the earth. So basically they're separated by this huge ocean, but they're parallel in terms of the racist anxieties that were expressed within both case studies. And I wanted readers to not only identify that, yes, these are expressions of racism, but they are anxieties about the place of whiteness within two different curriculums, in two different settler colonial societies. So I wanted readers to look at this and know that this is about global transactional whiteness and how around the world whiteness is still used to benchmark what we identify as being the curriculum. I just want to echo the words of a social work professor by the name of Ozzy Alazine, who once said that white privilege is your history being part of the core curriculum and mine being taught as an elective. And what we're seeing in both settler colonial societies is that what was once deemed a novelty or an elective to study is now increasingly valued as being part of the core curriculum. And those dedicated to conservative education are quite anxious about this because the more that we value different knowledge systems, the less likely we are to see that European knowledge systems are the benchmark. So, in some ways, when I looked at both case studies, sure, there were vicious expressions of racism, the narratives in both societies against incorporating different knowledge systems sparked a lot of rhetoric that was unkind, that was horrendous, that involved racially vilifying people of color or Indigenous peoples. But at the same time, they were anxieties about how curriculum is changing, how people, how students in both societies are learning about the true histories of what's happening, of how their societies were built. And as a result, this was making a lot of conservative educational proponents quite angry.
And how do you think your ideas are relevant for the broader public?
What's happening in education spaces is not just confined to education spaces, it's actually happening in just about every space. So, what is happening at the moment around the world is that there's this global reckoning with regards to racism in settler colonial projects and how settler colonial projects are tied to the ongoing oppression of Indigenous peoples. And this oppression manifests in education, in health, in criminal justice systems. And there's an awakening happening where those dedicated to social justice are looking at settler colonial projects, whether they be Aotearoa New Zealand, Hawaii, Turtle Island, or what we now call Canada in the United States, or so-called Australia, or the state of Israel. What we're seeing is that a lot of people are using a new lens to understand what's happening in these different colonial projects. Now, as a result, it means that this critical lens is extending to education, to health, to housing, employment, and so forth. And people want change to occur. And so that's why we need to consider these conservative education proponents, what they have to say, and why it's important to counter them, because it's a story of resistance to staying in the past and dedicating a commitment to colonization, or a way forward where we decolonize, where we acknowledge the harm of settler colonial ideologies and we display some sort of commitment to change it or to changing the whole system completely.